Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into a really powerful chapter from W.E.B. Du Bois' masterpiece, Black Reconstruction in America. And let me tell you, this isn't just a history lesson. It's a fundamental reframing of what we think happened after the Civil War. Right out of the gate, Du Bois hits us with this incredible thesis. He basically says, hey, you think the Civil War ended at Appomattox? Think again. He argues a whole new war started, a calculated, vicious counter-revolution. And its goal, it was all about forcing Black labor right back towards slavery. So, what did this war after the war actually look like? Well, Du Bois is really clear. This wasn't just the usual chaos you see after a big conflict. No, this was something else. It was an organized, violent, and systematic campaign to completely undo everything emancipation was supposed to achieve. And here's how Du Bois breaks it down. He sees the violence evolving in three distinct phases. First, you have the general lawlessness that follows any war. But then it gets more specific. It becomes a labor war, with planters trying to force freedmen back onto the plantations. And then, and this is the crucial part, it transforms into a race war, where poor whites are convinced to join forces with the wealthy planters to crush Black labor through sheer terror. Okay, so that brings us to the big question, right? The why. Why was all this happening? Why this incredibly organized campaign of violence? Well, according to Du Bois, if you want the real answer, you have to follow the money. I mean, the level of brutality during this period is just hard to comprehend. And Du Bois says, to really get it, you have to look past simple hatred. The real engine driving all of this was a cold, hard economic calculation made by the South's ruling class. Just picture it. The war ends. If you're a wealthy planter, you've lost almost everything. Your money is worthless. Your entire system of enslaved labor is gone. What's the one valuable thing you have left? Your land. And the only way to make that land profitable again was to get people to work it for next to nothing, a condition that looked an awful lot like the slavery they just lost. So what you get is this really tense three-way economic fight. You've got the planters desperately trying to lock freedmen into slave-like contracts. You've got poor whites who are now suddenly competing with Black workers for jobs and land. And then you have 4 million formerly enslaved people who are absolutely determined to be truly free and economically independent. For a little while, it was a very complicated struggle. So the motive was clear: economic control. With that goal in mind, the planter class and their allies unleashed an absolutely brutal campaign of terror to make it happen. And when we say reign of terror, that is not an exaggeration. You have people like Carl Schurz, who was reporting back to Congress, describing a landscape of pure horror. He wrote about finding the bodies of murdered Black people littering the highways, about men and women with their ears cut off or their skulls smashed in. It's just horrific stuff. And the scale of this violence is just staggering. Du Bois points to testimony from Louisiana, where in just a few weeks before the 1868 election, more than 2,000 people were killed or wounded. This wasn't just crime. This was targeted political terrorism. And this quote, it just brings the horror of it all into sharp focus. This is what was happening behind those numbers. These weren't just statistics. These were real people subjected to the most sadistic cruelty imaginable, all to send a terrifying message. And if you look at the so-called reasons for these Ku Klux Klan attacks, it becomes crystal clear what this was all about. You could be targeted for being a Republican, for carrying a gun, for trying to vote, or even just for being successful enough to own your own land. The goal was simple: crush any and all Black political and economic progress. Du Bois highlights these specific, heartbreaking stories. He talks about a man named Robert Fullerlove in Alabama, a hardworking guy who had managed to build a successful farm. Masked men came at night, burned his house down, destroyed all his crops, and ran him off his land. The message couldn't be clearer. Black economic independence would not be tolerated. Okay, so you have this widespread terror happening on the ground. The next question is, how did that translate into political power? Well, that's the next piece of this puzzle. A brilliant and ultimately successful political coup. You can just watch it unfold over these 7 years. The federal government tries to protect Black voters with new laws. So what happens? Paramilitary groups like the White League pop up, and their stated mission is to overthrow the government by force. It all builds to this messy, disputed election in 1876, which ends in the backroom deal that officially kills Reconstruction. This table, wow, this one table tells you everything you need to know about how well their strategy worked. Take a look at St. Landry Parish in Louisiana. In the spring of '68, the Republicans have a solid majority. Then there's a massive riot. Over 200 Republicans are killed. What happens in the fall election? The Republican vote drops to 0. The black vote was literally erased by violence. And get this wasn't some kind of secret conspiracy they whispered about in dark rooms. They wrote it down. This is from an actual Democratic campaign plan in South Carolina. Their official strategy was to control the black vote by any means necessary. Threaten them, bribe them, or just physically stop them from getting to the polls. And here it is, the final nail in the coffin, a grubby political deal to sort out the messy presidential election. The Republicans in the North got to keep the White House, and the white supremacist Democrats in the South got what they wanted all along. The U.S. Army was pulled out, leaving them completely free to do whatever they wanted. So the troops are gone, the political victory is complete. What comes next? Well, you can't just leave a vacuum. A whole new social and economic system had to be built from the ground up. And this right here, this is one of Du Bois's most brilliant and famous ideas. He calls it the public and psychological wage. The idea is that poor white workers got paid very low wages, just like black workers. But they were also paid a bonus, the wage of whiteness. They got public respect, better schools, better jobs, and the police looked the other way. This psychological boost was just enough to make sure they never, ever saw themselves as being in the same boat as black workers. It was a genius way to keep the entire laboring class divided and powerless. So this new order was built on 3 massive pillars. First, you take away all black political power using things like poll taxes and literacy tests. Second, you create a new kind of economic slavery, like the convict lease system, where black men could be arrested for anything and then leased out as slave labor. And third, you build the whole system of Jim Crow segregation to enforce white supremacy in every single aspect of daily life. And for Du Bois, the ultimate tragedy is that America as a whole just failed to get it. People failed to understand that this fight in the South wasn't just a regional issue. It was a battle for the very soul of the country. Was America going to be a real democracy, or was it going to be an empire built on exploiting certain groups of people? And that's where Du Bois leaves us. His work makes it clear that the end of Reconstruction wasn't a passive failure, it was an active, violent, and successful counter-revolution. And it forces us to grapple with a really tough question. What is the cost when we forget a history like this? And are we still paying that price today?